So maybe I should start with who I am. I'm Mutale Kaunda. I usually like to explain what my name means. So Mutale means to start with. Mlenga means creator or artist. Kaunda means gentle sound. Yeah, so Mutale starts with, and I'm starting this series of lectures for Mission Ecclesiology. I'm happy to be here, and I hope we're going to have a good time together. Just to start us off, this work is a work in progress, and I'm still working on bringing my materials together for a full or a complete research work. So hence my focus today is on just more descriptive aspects of Pentecostalism and their missional engagements and theological shifts, specifically in the Pentecostal Assemblies of God Church Zambia. So I am married to a man who is a pastor in the Pentecostal Assemblies of God's Church. So I'm from that church, and I feel like I'm well able to have a conversation in that particular area. I'm going to speak to us. Let me share the screen, sorry. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
So I'm going to speak with us on a subject that I'm calling Missional Ecclesiology, Pentecostalism between converting and reconverting. And as I mentioned, this is going to be a much more descriptive conversation today. Yeah.
Use the arrow.
All right. So yeah, you can see that's fine. Okay. Yeah. So Pentecostalism has always functioned within a precarious space in which it has constantly sought to hold in creative tension its Christian identity and indigenous spiritual identity. In 2008, Agbo Kalu, and in 2018, Nimi Wariboko enlightened that while these aspects appear to complement each other, they are simultaneously in conflict. Pentecostalism has grown through mining African spirituality while rejecting it in what has been described as a total break with the past. Therefore, Pentecostalism demonizes African culture and yet utilizes its resources for spiritual warfare, which is the intangible capital for prosperity gospel. I think every time we talk about Pentecostalism, I think what comes to mind in many people is prosperity gospel, and that's not going to be my focus. Sorry to disappoint. I'm just going to talk about the theological, missiological reflections and shifts that has happened within the Pentecostal church, particularly Pentecostal Assemblies of God Church in Zambia. So the Pentecostal Charismatic Church is quite a vibrant space in Africa, and it continues to grow increasingly. Young people resonate with this church and continue to flourish in their spiritual journeys and in their spiritual growth. The history of the Pentecostal church can be traced back to the 1940s, although its impact only began to be recognized in the 1980s. So the progress to become recognized as a Christian movement continues for the Pentecostal church, because in some spaces, and even if I include also even some ecumenical spaces, may still not acknowledge, recognize, and consider Pentecostal to be Christian for various reasons, which probably will pop up as I go. In the early 1980s, Pentecostals were less than 5% in Zambia's Christian population, and yet only a decade later, this grew to about 23.6%. These statistics are confirmed by Operation World, which cites the number of charismatics in mainstream Christianity as 25.8%, and evangelical Pentecostals as 25.7%. According to these figures, if charismatics in mainline or in mainstream Christianity were included, it means that over half of Zambia's population subscribes to a Pentecostal charismatic form of spirituality. And this form of spirituality could be said to represent the character of Zambian Christianity. Alan Anderson noted that what is not often appreciated in these statistics is that there is not only remarkable growth in Christianity, in Pentecostalism, but there's also a huge change in the character and orientation of Christianity, that is Zambian Christianity in this case. In the 1980s, while the Western form of charismatic renewal continued in the Roman Catholic, there was no official African-informed charismatic movement in most Zambian mainline churches, owing to the discrimination against and the marginalization of Pentecostals and their spiritualities on the grounds that they were seen as unorthodox and an accommodation of pagan practices. So the language of pagan practices for me sounds like a cut and paste from the mission enterprises, because during the time of the mission enterprise, when Africa was being Christianized, our names, Mutale, would be demonized. That's demonic. So when I was baptized to become a Christian, I have to become a Charity, a Lucy, an Isabel, not Mutale. That was pagan and demonic. So when the Pentecostals became pastors as indigenous pastors in Zambia, they also adopted the language as well. So, pagan. According to Bishop Andriano Chawe of the Pentecostal Assemblies of God, the history of the Pentecostal Assemblies of God Church Zambia is dependent on whom you ask. Around the 1948, a Canadian Christian mission to mainlands, abbreviated as CMML, a preacher attached himself to the South African Assemblies of God Church when CMML rejected him on account of him turning Pentecostal. He believed he was baptized in the Holy Spirit and could speak in tongues, and that caused him to be chased out of the church. So he attached himself to South African Pentecostal Assemblies of God, and but he was working within Zambia. But it was in 1955 that the Canadian Pentecostal Assemblies of God sent the first missionaries to start PAOGZ, that is Pentecostal Assemblies of God Zambia. This was also at the time when Zambia was going through so much politically, as they were fighting to become independent from their colonial officials. A Bible college was opened to shape indigenous Zambian pastors who were later sent to go and start churches, plant churches in rural Zambia. Many of these pastors failed to implement the Western lessons they had learned from the Bible college because these did not resonate with the Zambian religious perspectives. And here I quote Kenneth Mutata, who is the director of Public Witness and Diaconia, who argued that, and I quote, "Initially, the Lutheran churches in Africa mimicked the practices of their founding European mother churches, but their beliefs differed. Some African Lutheran Christians tended to be Lutheran during the day under the surveillance of their European missionary founding, but secret members of the African indigenous churches during the night. The reason was simple to understand. Many of these Christians identified with the practices in the spirit churches because the latter represented African spirituality better than the Lutheran and other missionary founded churches." End quote. This Mutata shared in Ethiopia at the Lutheran World Federation consultation in 2019. Now, this was also true in various missionary churches all over Africa. the Zambian population that was going through turmoil in wanting to gain independence could not relate or even resonate with the Western message that came to them through the Zambian pastors from the Western education they had received. Bishop Charwe argues again that Zambians, like other people of Africa, were looking for a God who can be experienced in real life. They wanted to hear a message that would bring deliverance from the demons and evil forces that oppressed them. This they found in the Pentecostal message. And so in 1968, the Bible College was closed, I think because it was difficult for when indigenous Zambians were trained at this college, and then they were sent into the rural Zambia to implement what they had learned. So the college closed for 10 years. And when it reopened in 1978 on the Copperbelt province, the first class of diploma graduates was sent within the urban Zambia. And these were assistant pastors to the Western missionaries. These were relatively younger men, and they had learned a few lessons, so they incorporated aspects of Zambian culture in their ministry, and the PAOG there began to sprout. Various values identified what it meant to be a Pentecostal Christian. Number one, the Pentecostal church was all out with the message of conversion, soul winning, as it was known among Pentecostals. Soul winning was the Pentecostal mantra, and at the heart of conversion was the biblical text, to go ye therefore and make disciples of all nations. In fact, there was also an inclination to speak using the KJV in order to sound more spiritual. So how art thou? Pentecostals positioned themselves as the apex of Christianity, and they went as far as reconverting Christians from other denominations, such as the Catholic Church and the United Church of Zambia, CMML, Seventh-day Adventists, Jehovah's Witnesses, and the Reformed churches in Zambia. Basically, mainline churches, the Pentecostals didn't believe they were born again, so they went to reconvert them. If a member of the Pentecostal Assemblies of God Church was to marry from any of these denominations, that person would have to go through Pentecostal spiritual formation until the church leadership in PAOGZ were satisfied that the person was indeed born again. For the Pentecostal church, a person who was not a born-again Christian could not be friends with a born-again Christian, because can two walk together unless they have agreed? Or bad company corrupts good morals. Hence, the only thing a Christian would do is to preach the message of salvation to those who were considered non-believers. And so Reinhard Bonnke's maxim, as Mutale Kaunda quotes, depopulating hell and populating heaven became popular among Zambian Pentecostals in their soul-winning endeavors. So the overnight prayers, interdenominational prayers, revivals, and crusade had themes such as give us the heart for the lost, igniting the passion for the lost, and God's heart beats for the lost being those who are not Pentecostal Christians. T.L. Osborne's 1967 book, Soul Winning, Out Where the Sinners Are, was the most cherished book among Zambian Pentecostals in their ministry of evangelism, or missions as it were. Believers were exhorted to have genuine love for the lost, which meant that they were obedient to the Great Commission and believed soul winning to be a rewarding spiritual exercise. In its infancy, the Pentecostal church was seen as not Christian by the Catholics and United Church. Hence, when the Pentecostal gained prominence, they were out to reconvert these two and other denominations. Second, being baptized in the Holy Ghost. You should see, I use Holy Ghost, not Holy Spirit, because that was more powerful in the day than the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Ghost. So being baptized in the Holy Ghost and speaking in tongues was highly Pentecostal and was seen as being truly born again. Every born again Christian needed to speak in heavenly tongues, as this was symbolic of their born again status. Thirdly, laying on of hands and healing was another Pentecostal identity. This is one of the aspects that attracted most indigenous Zambians to Pentecostal spirituality, and it was closer to the indigenous spiritualities, because in the indigenous spiritual space, the leader would touch those who were sick and they would receive healing, or the leader would receive revelation after laying hands on the sick, that this particular ailment would need a certain herb for the healing to occur. So the laying of hands was another identity that Pentecostals also used. And fourth, while other denominations condemned, I'll give you an example. Before I became a member of the Pentecostal church, I used to go to the United Church of Zambia. That's where I grew up. My mother was a member of that church. And as a teenager, I went to church one day and I was wearing, it was a long skirt, but it had a slit on it. And as soon as I entered the door, there was an elderly woman who came around. We have these African fabrics that we use for various things. So she came around me and she put that thing around me because there was a slit on my skin. And I will tell you that I never listened to what was happening in church that day because I was embarrassed. So, and I started to look for a different church. And Pentecostalism was that church. So, while other churches, where was it? Oh yeah, condemned the wearing of trousers, dresses, and skirts with a slit, makeup, and so on, the Pentecostal church embraced it. And their mantra, cleanliness is next to godliness, was born. This brought many young people to the Pentecostal church. The youth meetings were vibrant with singing, dancing, tongues, including those who went in trance. At this point, there were those who were skeptical of Pentecostal spirituality and those who joined in its growth. The Catholic Church introduced the charismatic service, which most young Catholic Christians then started attending. The United Church of Zambia introduced the English service, which was charismatic in worship style and was attended by many young people. In these services, the young people were also speaking in tongues and mimicking the Pentecostal worship service in its performance. Number 5, the Pentecostal church introduced the art of praying from the heart, or as the Spirit leads, instead of liturgical prayers that were written down. And this freedom of expression in prayer was so attractive for many, young and old. And with all this growth came the televangelists on Fridays. National TV Zambia would broadcast gospel time. So the North Mid Assemblies of God Church with Bishop Joshua Banda, who got his PhD from OCMS. And then there was Bishop Joy Makando with his program called The Time for the Hour of Blessing by Bread of Life Church, which is one of the biggest Pentecostal churches in Zambia. And then there was Dr. Nevas Mumba of Victory Ministries with his mantra, Zambia shall be saved. And the Dunamis Fire Impact with Bishop Dan Pule. So these also were reaching out to many, calling the young and old to join the Pentecostal church. In 1991, the second Zambian president, FTJ Chiluba, declared Zambia a Christian nation. And he was a Pentecostal Christian who had surrounded himself with Pentecostal clergy at the time of presidential inauguration. President Chiluba was a charismatic personality. As many Pentecostals at the time, he also spoke English fluently. So with the Pentecostal church, speaking in English, holding services in English, preaching in English, singing English songs during services were all characteristics of being Pentecostal. So with this Zambia as a Christian nation declaration being enshrined in the Zambian Constitution preamble, the Pentecostal church began to flourish. The Pentecostal Assemblies of God Zambia has taken great strides in acknowledging women as leaders and ordaining them. in the past, from the mission enterprise era to around late 1980s, women were not ordained. The first woman in Pentecostal assemblies to be ordained was in 1991, according to Reverend Kenny Kangwa, who's also from the Pentecostal Church. Currently, women who are married to pastors in PLGZ have taken theological education and have been ordained into ministry, and most of them work as associate pastors alongside their spouses. Many women had to lead women's groups in their churches and not be ordained as clergy. In fact, the Pentecostal Assemblies of God Zambia has been encouraging women to take up political roles and inspiring them to take up leadership roles in the public spheres and in their communities. They've been encouraged and inspired to get seats in parliament and to strive to be in decision-making positions. Although in private, wives are still taught to be obedient and to submit to the headship of the spouse, as Adrian van Klinken argued. But also you can see an article that I co-authored with Mutale Kaunda, which is titled Pentecostalism, Female Spirit, Politicians, and Populism in Zambia. While Zambian Pentecostal Church in general features prophetesses prominently, these prophetesses usually submit to some form of headship who happen to be men. In Mutale Kaunda's article, The Making of Pentecostal Zambia, for instance, one of the prominent prophetesses of Barak Ministries International submits to the authority of Bishop David Oyedepo of Living Faith Church Worldwide International in Nigeria. And another prophetess of Norman Ministries submits to Hubert Angel of Spirit Embassy Ministries Church in Zimbabwe. The downsides to the fact that PLGZ has been ordaining women and has been encouraging women to take up leadership in public spheres, in corporate spheres, is that over 60 years after PLGZ, we still have no woman bishop. And I look forward to a day when a woman will be ordained in the Pentecostal Assemblies of God as a bishop. So, what are some of the current missional trajectories in Zambia? I will be fluctuating between what happened in the past and what's happening currently within the PLG Zambia. So apart from emphasizing Pentecostal mission theologies of being born again, of speaking in tongues, of healing and so forth, in its infancy, which ended in the late 1990s, Zambian Pentecostalism generally followed a number of discernible theological trajectories. These were variations in emphasis, but the majority subscribed to these missiological tenets. These theological trajectories formed the mythological springboard for the initial Pentecostal political engagement in the 1990s, which is the period of President Chiluba who declared Zambia a Christian nation. So the Zambian Pentecostals defined themselves as soul winners, as I said. So to be born again was to be initiated into a divine social group of soul winners. Indigenous Zambian Pentecostals wanted to break with African cultural fabric, and yet they were still at conflict, as they also wanted to use the same African culture to attract membership to their churches. Within the African indigenous religious worldview, exorcism of unfriendly spirits, I didn't say evil spirits, I said unfriendly spirits, because I think in my Bemba culture, it's usually termed unfriendly spirits, not evil spirits. And returning of friendly spirits is an important one that is in the cultural worldview. The Pentecostal Church focused on exorcising what they called generational spirits or generational curses. These are spirits that were holding families at ransom in terms of, for instance, poverty, divorce, barrenness, failing businesses, and so on. This means that, for instance, if 2 or 3 persons in the same family have gone through similar experiences, say financial loss, particular sickness, This was seen as a generational curse, and the family needed to break that curse through deliverance. Sometimes the entire family will be visited by the Pentecostal church for prayers of deliverance. Other times, the one who was born again in the family would stand in the gap for his or her family for deliverance. And therefore, warfare was an important aspect of Pentecostal spirituality, and the Pentecostals in Zambia would call themselves demon slayers. The Pentecostal changed the outlook on music in the church. R&B, rap, reggae, raga were the genres that young people were listening to, and the Pentecostal church contextualized these songs to gospel rap, gospel R&B, gospel jazz, and so forth. Some mainline churches called Pentecostals as disco houses for this contextualization of worldly music. So influenced by African American and some Jamaican or Caribbean gospel artists like Kirk Franklin, Mary Mary, Papa San, Sissy, and Bibi Winans. They also reconverted, so to speak, some hymns into more vibrant R&B or rap type of songs. It is also the Pentecostals that revolutionized funeral in Zambia. So in Zambia, when you have a funeral, it takes about 3 to 5 days between the time that the person has died and burial. This is because people have to come from all over Zambia. Family has to come from all over Zambia to come and be with the bereaved family. And so you can imagine that people have taken leave from work for that particular time. So usually they'll never be given more than 5 days off. So within that time, burial has to take place. The Catholic, I think, had also drawn on the Zambian culture of Ichimbo Chamariro, funeral songs, and so on. During funerals, whether the church was the United Church, Reformed Church, whatever church, mostly at funerals, these were the songs that were sung, and these were songs that were emotional songs that would lead to more tears and so on and so forth. And then the Pentecostal church came on site and preached celebration of life. So this person has gone, but we celebrate the life that we shared with them before they died. And so music changed from emotional, trying to make people cry songs to more vibrant songs. But also within the African view, well, Zambian view at least, we have dances at funerals. So there's a particular dance that you dance for the funerals, and at the funerals culturally, I suppose that when it's a Christian family, they would refuse, you can't dance and all that, but the Pentecostal brought all that back. So bringing the African culture and Christianity back to commit to make things different. So they revolutionized funeral rites and church services. The missionaries had access to different ethnic groups within Zambia at the time of the mission enterprise. So for instance, the white fathers who were Catholic priests did mission work among the Bemba people of northern Zambia. So you find that in the Catholic Church, there'll be more Bemba people then. And then the work of the Pentecostal Assemblies of God Church in Canada began their work in Eastern Province, later extended to the Copperbelt Province. So they did work among the Tumbukas. The Baptist Union of Zambia has its origins in South African Mission of the Baptist Union of South Africa. This group focused on the Copperbelt Province of Zambia, where the British South African Company played a significant role in the history of Zambia's copper industry and also the colonial rule. The Baptist is still said to be the church of the Lamba people. The Evangelical Church was among the Kaondes in Northwestern Province, and so on and so on. Yet when the Pentecostals began to be recognized in Zambia, they spread the news of unity, that as long as one is born again, their ethnicity does not matter. This brought all ethnic groups into the Pentecostal embrace. So various mainline churches have also begun to embrace this, although in their leadership, you'll find that it will be probably a particular ethnic group that will take up leadership positions. So, in its embryonic stage, the Pentecostal Church focused on spiritual well-being of the members and had little, if any, social and community involvement at all. The innovation years from the year 2000 to the year 2015, in the PAOG at least, refer to a time of great social, economic, political activity. These years involved the Pentecostal Church immensely. So increasingly, the Pentecostal Church recognized that the mission of the church is not only to bring the word of God to the people, but also to show the redeeming love of Christ through acts of kindness and through involvement in the social fabric of the nation. Christians or not, the people live on earth and not on heaven. Hence, the need for social engagement is vital. So during this current period now, the Pentecostal Assemblies of God Church leadership has encouraged its membership to be active participants within their communities. This has led to the public ministry for Pentecostal Assemblies of God Zambia, moving from soul winning to public ministry. The church is currently perceived as the center of community transformation, and hence discipleship is tailored toward transformation. Instead of chasing or casting out spiritual demons, some physical demons are also necessary to cast out, such as injustice, inequality, exclusion, and marginalization. So transformation therefore means various things, including but not limited to emancipating the mind from mental slavery, as Bob Marley sang. Renewing the mind is not only spiritual, but in recognizing alternative ways of becoming justice-oriented communities of faith and engaging conversations on gender relations, health issues, development, and education. This is a major shift from inward, which was focusing on the local church, the individual transformation, and self-preservation, to outward community transformation, where the local church is the salt of the world that reaches out to flavor the community. This shift means that the healing of individual churches, that the healing of individuals changes to healing of communities, and everyone gets access to this healing. This outward community transformation discipleship approach and inspires church members and clergy to aspire to get education, to get involved in politics, to strive and engage in health issues such as HIV, AIDS, cancer, and so on, that continue to ravage many. So some churches within PAOGZ have established orphanages, the Oasis of Love in Chingola on the Copper Belt, and the Lazarus Project in Lusaka, and many others. An example of the North Mid Assemblies of God Church in Lusaka, they focused on the HIV and AIDS project with the project called the Lazarus Project under the Circle of Hope. This project has helped rehabilitate more than 1,000 street kids since the year 2000. This project called Circle of Hope does not operate in a silo, but is also a member of the Churches Health Association of Zambia, CHAZ, and Lusaka District Health AIDS Task Force. So North Mid Assemblies Church preaches community engagement and continues to inspire members to do their part for the community. And there I quote Sarojini, who argues aptly, there has been a consistent call in missiological circles to understand mission as not just conversion, but indeed as spreading the good news of justice and love, a move which of necessity requires transforming injustice in the world. The Pentecostal Assemblies of God became open to the call to engage community and social struggles of the church, realizing that while spiritual aspects were important, the physical, the emotional, the psychological were just as important. In his recent 2023 book titled Community Transformation, Revisiting Discipleship Foundations, and Now for the Next Generation, Pentecostal Assemblies of God Zambia presiding Bishop Joshua Banda explores comprehensively the role of revisiting the historical foundations of discipleship. This book calls for a renewed focus on mobilizing resources, advocating for social issues, providing social services, and fostering community cohesion. And I am going to end or conclude with the words from the late Cuban American theologian, Maria Ada Isazi Diaz, who said, "To struggle for justice is to pray." The Pentecostal Church has entered a dispensation of grappling with social justice issues, and therefore they continue to pray in terms of justice. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mutale, for your presentation, where you have tried to work out or explain and describe the precarious space that the Pentecostals in churches in Zambia are negotiating, and yet at the same time looking at their missional commitment and endeavor to work out conversion, or what you have mentioned as converting, reconversion, but not only looking at that and bringing them to the fold of Pentecostalism, but also to work out social justice that can be experienced by all. So, is there any question? Round of questions? Yes, those on the screen, you can just click on the hand at the bottom and I can call you. Yes, anybody? Okay, I will start while the others are thinking of which of the question they will start with. So, okay, you were talking about, that negotiating, and also talking about, you were talking about something like Africans by night, and that they are always demonized because people tend to think others, or especially Western Christian tradition, things that the Pentecostal are heathen, going back to the indigenous way of life. But I would like you to pick up, you have of course mentioned about music and reimagining funeral dances and Christianizing it. And can you give us a specific idea or example of how Pentecostals have gone back to their traditional understanding and way of life, and bringing out the justice aspect of what a Christian community should be like? An example, something that the Pentecostal Church in Zambia has been engaged with, which is grounded in indigenous tradition and practice.
I think, thank you for that, Marina. That's a good question. But I think the project of going back to, I mentioned the Lazarus Project and the Oasis of Love project. And these two, I will tell you that they will be enshrined in the African worldview, because one, they are both talking about HIV and AIDS, but they're also engaging with orphaned children. So culturally, the Zambians, when a parent die, or parents, especially when both parents die, children are never left alone. Well, at least they were never left alone. So there was always what we called Isambo Liamfwa, which is, how do I put this? Indigenous postmortem, so to speak. But so the family will gather together after burial, and they'll talk about probably what transpired during the time these people were sick. What did we do wrong? What did we do right? What can we improve on? And how do we take care now of the children that they've left behind? So there was always an aspect of children being taken in by the sister or the brother or the grandmother. Somebody had to take the children. They would never be left alone to fend for themselves. So the Oasis Project and the Lazarus Project, where they're bringing orphans to be able to assist in ways that they can, because these projects are dealing with education, health, transforming the lives of these orphans that have gone. So for me, that is an aspect that is enshrined within the culture of Zambia. In fact, there's also the saying, it's general in Africa. Oh God. No. I need to say this. A child is raised by the village. What was that? What is that?
It takes a village.
It takes a village to raise a child. Yes. So taking them into these spaces, into these orphanages, it may, it has aspects of Western conceptions, because they are not with an immediate family that they can call mom and dad. By this, I mean, when my mother died, I still had mothers around. Her sisters are not my aunties, they are my mothers. I call them mom up to this time. My father's brothers are not my uncles, they are my daddies, they're my fathers. So despite them not having that, they're still within a family of other siblings within this orphanage.
Yes, so I think you brought out very well the connectedness of the community in that context. And I think what you said about healing of individual changes to healing of communities and everyone having access to what is available for the communities. So I think you brought that out very well with your example. Anyone else? Otherwise, I have a question again. Okay, first now then, Nikki.
Yeah, thank you, Mutale, for the presentation. It's quite insightful, especially for my research, because one of the sites that I am taking as my research site is Pentecostal Church. So I am hoping to gain lots of insights from this. I have one question that I'm quite curious about. You talked about women leadership, and you said that the church, encourages and promotes leadership of women in different spheres, even in political. So I'm assuming definitely in the church too. At the same time, you also brought out this disparity between what is being preached and what is practically being done, because there have been no women bishops so far. So I'm really curious to what is the reason for this disparity? Because I am kind of like thinking if there is a link between what I see in my research context, where apparently Christianity brings some kind of women empowerment, providing some sort of freedom to women. But ironically, it also is instrumental in somehow suppressing the status of women. So I want to see if there is any connection between that here.
I would like to know that. I would like to know why women are not ordained as bishops yet, because it's been over 65 years, and the first woman was ordained in 1991. So, I mean, from 1991 to now, it's a number of years. We should have a female bishop, but we don't. And to be honest, I don't say that I know why we don't have a woman bishop, but I still think patriarchy still plays a role, because, like I mentioned, there's this encouragement for women, take up public space, fill the parliamentary seats, be in the corporate world, do this and that. But still, there is also an aspect of at home. It's within the same church. So this is preached on the pulpit, this is spoken to women about. And then when my research is mostly, not this one, my research is mostly focused on rites of passage for women, initiation rites. So in those initiation rites that are marital initiation rites, women are taught to submit to the husband, do this for your husband, do that for your husband, do and do and do and do and do for your husband, or he will leave you. So there is that aspect where go and be in the corporate world, but still submit because it's going to leave you. Do this and this, but don't do it too much, because now it seems like you're undermining your husband. So there is always this tension. And so as to why women bishops are not ordained yet, I still think there is still some patriarchal tentacles that are still holding back. There should be some people who are saying, let's ordain them, and there should be some people saying, not yet. We haven't reached that place yet, because if we ordain them, they will take up the space. But I'm a Bemba woman, and Bemba women were religious leaders in the community before missionary enterprise. So it was women who offered prayers in times of disaster, in times of this and that. And then these tables were attended when missionaries came, because and I mentioned with the Bemba people, it was the white fathers, ironically, who came. So these are Catholic priests. So they want to ordain men, not women. So they couldn't understand having a woman in religious spaces. So of course they trained men to take up pastoral positions, and women were left behind. And so those are some of the indigenous aspects that we still have to grapple with.
Yeah, thank you. Before you, John, I see me. I don't know who me you are. Can you please show your face if possible and ask your question?
Me is Esther Mombo. Hello, Mutale, and hello, CMS, my family in another land. How are you? Thank you so much, Mutale, for that. I was like very, very happy to hear you and to resonate with some of the things that you have said, and particularly this question that is ongoing about African culture. And these days I'm questioning issues of going back and wondering when did the Africans leave? We talk about going back. When did they leave? Because the African theologians in the 60s, of course, who had reacted against African independent churches in the 20s and the 30s, criticizing them around issues of culture and around culture, especially of women. And then the circle of concerned women theologians, in which you are, who wake up and say, we are not going to take African culture wholesale. We'll try and look at it objectively and see what is that is evil that we can reject and what is it that we can build on. And then our very own Musimbi Kanyoro, in her African cultural hermeneutics, discusses the whole notion of this idea of oscillating between what is African culture and what is Western culture, uses the language of one leg here and the other leg there. And then Odioe, of course, in her own critique, talking about whether Africans really left or Africans were very hospitable, that they could take both cultures, and that is what we practice. Hence my question of the language of going back. When did they leave, and going back to what kind of whatever thinking? So back to you. Thank you so much. But thank you very much for the lecture. Thank you so much. Yeah.
Please stay.
Thank
Esther,
you.
don't go away.
I'm so happy to see you here. It's been a while. I said I missed you. So thank you for that question, Professor Mombo. Well, we never left, actually, as Africans at all. We never left. We never went anywhere. But I think what has happened, I'm not sure if I use the words going back. That must have been an error on my part. But anyway, since I used it, I have to answer for it. So we never left as Africans. You are right. And Musimbi Kanyoro, Odioe, all of them are right in saying that we never left and there's no going back and all that. But I think what happened is that African culture was so demonized. Firstly, we were called the dark continent, and then everything, like I mentioned, was demonized. Mutale, you can't be Mutale as a Christian, you have to be Esther. Because now you're a Christian. So
I am a Christian.
Yeah, because now you're baptized, you are Esther, so you can't be Mutale anymore. And so I think those are some of the issues that have led to whether to the struggle in our culture. Should we hold on to culture? Should we then take the Christian culture? Because Christianizing Africa was also known as civilizing Africa. So if I hold on to my African culture, am I now uncivilized? So that, I think that's the question. So it's not really leaving the culture, it's grappling with the fact that should I hold on to my culture as an African woman and what it means for me as an African person, even though I'm a Christian. So if I hold on to my Christianity and my faith, then Africa should be done away with, because now I'm Esther and I'm not Mutale. So these are some of the issues that I think we have been grappling with. And I think even not to romanticize African culture, there are aspects within our African cultures that really we needed to part away with. And also there are many aspects within our African culture that we really need to still embrace and continue holding on to. even in my writings and my PhD, which you looked at, I grappled with that as well, talking about the fact that we cannot romanticize African culture to say it was better, it was better. There were bad things in there, and there are still some good things that we can still hold on to. So we are not going back to anything or any culture. We are grappling with the fact that is African culture still a part of me when I'm a Christian? Or am I demonizing myself by continuing with my Africanness as a Christian?
Yeah, just to join on that, I appreciate, Esther, you pointing out when we talk about going back to African. I think Africanness, I think this is not just for people from Africa, but I think it's used by many of us when we say we need to go back our roots. We need to go back to our culture and tradition. So I'm just asking and throwing this question as, would it mean that would it be more appropriate or adequate to say that denial of Africanness and therefore or intentionally alienating someone from their traditional roots? I am also grappling with that question because I've also often used that word, going back to our roots. So is this something that, Esther, could you shed a little bit light on that? What would we say?
I don't know what would say, but I struggle with the going back motif. Because as Mutale has put on, we never left. And as the women theologians write, the debate is that one leg there and the other leg, the other side. It's, for me, is holding the tension. There is tension. There is tension because of how you critique the culture from outside, and you critique the internal culture. And Mutale has pointed out that, yeah, there are aspects that we do away with. And that's what African women theologians have spent a decade trying to discuss. But there's a sense in which, for me, is how do we hold the tensions? Because I am in Kenya today, any marriage ceremony, I don't see anything that was left. What I see is a coloring. It's like wearing a turban on top of your head, or wearing what Mutale was given at the church and she ran away from it, a turban to cover her slit skirt. I think what has happened is that there are layers and layers of that. But when you remove those layers, the aspects within the African culture are still very, very strong. And that's what gives people identity. I see people coming from the West to ensure that they meet some of those rituals. And that's why I say we never left. It's just how do we hold the tensions between that which we were taught to live and we never left, but we were hospitable. As Odio would say, that you are guests, we cannot throw it away. But there are also other bad ways in which we were taught to live. Yeah. In a school, for example, you are beaten if you never spoke English. So there are other methods that were bad, but really you never left. For me, it's now more and more I say it's holding the tensions together. I don't have a new word. Mutale may have a good word to use, but for me, it's holding the tensions. And I live within those tensions. When I see every ritual, it's what my grandmother told me it was. They may speak it in English, but it is actually the ritual in my own ethnic community in terms of giving men and women identity, giving children identity of what their Africanness is. And of course, it's also so problematic talking about Africanness. What is it? So we are living in this tension to me. But thanks, Mutale.
Yeah, thank you. John.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you very much. I was very struck in your account of the one of the themes, which was a movement from what the colonial churches would have called a sect. That's a very isolated community, a Christian community, I'm talking about the Pentecostal church, over a period of 60, 70 years, into a church that is now engaging at the highest levels of state, and no doubt speaking prophetically into the political crises of the state. That's really striking. I just wonder whether you could help us reflect a bit on two aspects of that. The first one is the nature of the change in spirituality that shift entails. And secondly, are there some dangers in that movement, to being the consequences of being close to power?
Thank you, John. Very important questions. I think to start with, the shift has really been helpful. I think from 1991, when President Chiluba declared Zambia a Christian nation, so there was this vibrancy with the Pentecostal church. So pastors were in public spaces, pastors were all over the place, and all this and that. But the likes of Joshua Banda, Joy Makando, Never Smomba, we knew because of them being in our homes on TV every Friday, Saturday. So we knew those. But then they had become even more public because now they are with the president. So, for instance, when in 1993, when the Zambian national soccer team perished in Gabon, and President Chiluba in the stadium, we held a funeral for them, and he was praying, even speaking in tongues in the stadium, and the Pentecostal pastors were with him. And this was an exciting time, but also it is quite a danger because Pentecostal pastors have been accused of getting brown envelopes from political parties, from presidents and government and so on, which means that they may shush on certain things because now you're getting these envelopes. And so there's a danger in that, and also affiliating so closely probably to the government becomes problematic in terms of how then do you speak against the ills that are happening, how the government is not doing this, how then do you speak to that aspect of governance? So there are indeed some dangers.
Yeah. Shaker first.
Something that struck me was, I think I have not misheard, you're saying that other denominations probably went to the ethnic lines, to different tribes and Pentecostals, united people in a way. And what was that factor that brings those people together? Maybe clothing, or maybe music, or maybe funeral things that we're talking about. What is the kind of glue that people from different ethnic groups can come together as a part of a Pentecostal church? Is it the sheer African heritage, or is it a theology, a spiritual practice, something? What could be the factor that can bring this disparate group of people together?
I think to begin with, the Pentecostal spirituality was just attractive generally to the people, but Pentecostalism also started with Eastern Province, where Tumbukas were the people that were evangelized by the Pentecostal Assemblies of God, Canada. So PLGZ was also just mostly Tumbuka people. But then they began to preach a message saying, it doesn't matter your tribe. I part away with the word tribe. That's why I use ethnic group. If you are born again, you are my brother. If you are born again, you are my sister. So ethnic lines should not divide us. So firstly, Pentecostal by itself its spirituality attracted people to them. And then now they are aware that I don't really necessarily have to be a Tumbuka to belong to the Pentecostal church. They are embracing me for who I am. So they would come in like that. But also these aspects of music, because when you talk, especially with young people in the church, you will find music attracts them. So if we are just going to sing hymns this Sunday and next Sunday hymns and tomorrow hymns and especially talk about Gen Z now. There is all this. Now I'm coming to this side now because we went to a particular church in South Korea, and then I took my daughter to Zambia for something, and then we attended a Pentecostal church. And then on our flight back to Korea, I was asking her, so what did you think of the church? And then she said to me, that's a church I would like to attend every Sunday. That's a Pentecostal church. So there is just Pentecostal spirituality attracted them, but also it was also marrying with the African aspects of their well-being. So Africans, we like to dance mostly. Well, I'm generalizing and essentializing, but well, we like to dance. So if you are in a church and you're just standing still, it wasn't so for many, but there's nothing I can do. I'm a member of this church, but now there's a Pentecostal church that is telling me I'm free to dance in the church. So I can go and be there. So there are these aspects that identified as Pentecostal values that attracted, even though, and especially that it went beyond ethnic lines. So you don't have to be Kaunda to be a minister.
Chama.
Yeah, I think also added on to what she had said, that I think the language was also key. What you had mentioned, like the linguistic line, I must, ashamed to say, when Pentecostal started English language, made it easier for a country that has 72 ethnic groups with different languages to deal with that. So the language itself made it much more hospitable, that everybody, this was almost a neutral language. So everybody felt comfortable that it's not my language that is built, it's a language that is not ours, all of us anyway. So it created a space for everybody, which was different from other churches in that sense. But also you can think of things like women. I think in the traditional context of most of ethnic, probably you have heard of what is called the matrilineal belt, which runs through Zambia, Congo, and all those kind of places. The foundation are very strong with women, which was completely destabilized with Christianity. So with Pentecostal becoming friendlier to women, it was easier now for women to start moving, young people to start flocking because of the other things. So there are many factors in that. But I want to raise just one thing here, Mutale, which I feel you haven't tabled straight in terms of the relationship between the shrine, the African understanding of the so-called the community, and the way Assemblies of God has been shifting itself. And I think I'm following up also here on the question that was raised by John, in terms of a shift in terms of spirituality into here. The Pentecostal Assemblies of God doesn't see itself now as normative church in the community. It sees itself as a center of transformation. It is like the intensified space of the Holy Spirit that is moving from there to transform the entire community. So it's the flow of it is a church. So they plant a church, and that church becomes like a shrine in the community. So this is very, very African in terms of its self-conception, not necessarily Western. It becomes like a shrine. In the past African understanding of itself, there is no community without a shrine. The shrine is fundamentally the focus of the community itself. So Pentecostal Assemblies of God now is moved towards that. And I think I would want to hear what you think on this one, whether it has lost itself, as John is saying, or it's making sense. So this radical shift to make itself as a shrine, at the center of spirituality of transformation for the community. How do you see that in terms of understanding? I'm speaking as from Assemblies of God now to protect my church.
Okay, then I'm going to cut Assemblies to pieces. Well, I think that even how you have put it, I doubt that the assemblies, the Pentecostal Assemblies Church themselves would agree to say we are now functioning as a shrine. I doubt very much that they would think that's what they are doing, but it is actually what they are doing. And sometimes intentionally or unintentionally, we do go back. Stop going.
Yeah.
We do hold in tension our indigenous way of life and with the Christian spirituality. So this for me is still holding in tension, as Professor Mombo said, is still holding in tension our indigenous worldviews and our Christian spirituality still working together. And I think that this is not a wrong thing, it's not a bad idea to function in the way that we understand ourselves better. I think it's a next step to becoming a more community of faith that is inclusive of what our perspectives and worldviews are, because then it will comes into space, into its space, what it is we value as a people, what it is we value as a nation of Zambia, and what it is our culture values as a nation.
No, wait, first here. Here, then according to who I see first, Samuel, David, then Sarah.
Yeah.
And which in last? Samuel first. I hold the power
Okay.
as to who I saw first.
Okay. Just want to ask whether we have considered what also that Pentecostal outfit carried with it also. Is it a Western modernization? Because you realize even in our country, we have that movement, but they look themselves as a superior kind of a worship more than any other. What do you comment about that?
The way they carried themselves, is it a Western? Is that your question?
Yeah, a modernized Western view.
Oh, well, they're coming from a Western worldview anyway. But anyway, I think mostly for especially Pentecostalism in Zambia, maybe indeed we did see ourselves as the apex of Christianity, and we did see others. I think it was because after being marginalized for so long, because the Pentecostal church was trying to bring in our cultural aspects into our ways of worship, and then being marginalized for that, being seen as not Christian enough, and then so when you get to prominence and you know that, sorry, can I turn off my laptop and turn this off, Marina, because my battery is dying.
Yeah, just exit.
Okay.
I'll just close it. Yeah. Just close it.
Yes. Okay.
Just close it. Yeah, fine.
Yeah. So what was I saying? Yeah. So the coming to a place where now you are recognized, and not only recognized, and the people that really didn't want you in the first place are now looking to have what it is you have. So puts you at a place where you come to believe with yourself, actually I'm the best there is.
Recording in progress.
Yeah, I'm the best that there is. So they think one thing in the first place, but they do actually want the fruits that I am giving. But here,
Where are you?
here. Oh, sorry, that's us.
But yeah,
Sorry.
just continue again.
Yeah, so I think the Pentecostals putting themselves out there as the best of Christianity that there is also came from, I think most of the times that we talk about this, Chama, and I'm sorry to bring you into this, but we talk about the fact that when we were younger, and you were in class and you did something and the teachers, because there was beating in class, so they'll beat you. And then you feel like I'll be a teacher when I grow up so that I can beat their children one day. So there was always that. So when you are Pentecostal, you are seen as nothing. And then now you are here and those also you as nothing want what you have, actually. Because what happened is that people started leaving mainstream mission churches, coming into the Pentecostal churches and coaching, as they called it. But that meant that we have something to offer that everybody is looking for. So whether that is, I wouldn't say that it's completely Western, because also if I say it's completely Western, then it would mean that in Africa we are just a perfect culture that's really just never even bothered to glorify ourselves or to show off and say I've got this and I've got that, which probably we did and we do. So I wouldn't say it's completely Western.
I said after this was David's, right? Yeah.
Yeah, so you were speaking, I was thinking of my own salvation context. Since 2014 in particular, we are kind of witnessing the ugly, violent side of faith in politics, faith as politics, particularly with the rise of the BJP, which is a Hindu nationalist party in my country. And since 2014, all minorities have been made to feel like they are not really wanted. And there is active persecution against Christians, obviously in various pockets of North India in particular, but particularly Muslims suffering a lot. And obviously, the Zambian context is very different with Christianity being in majority. But I'm wondering if there is any evidence of persecution of other Christian minorities, because I can understand that Pentecostals in particular are powerful because of their association with the centers of power. And so if you are aware of any sort of examples of Christians persecuting other Christians in Zambia through their affiliation with centers of power, because we see examples of that in other contexts. Obviously, in Eastern Europe, we have several examples of Orthodox Church aligning itself with the state now with a view to marginalizing Pentecostal Christianity and other forms of Christianity. In Malawi, for example, we have one tradition of Christianity persecuting another tradition of Christianity. So is Zambia very different from the rest of the world, or one outfit of Christianity is not really able to tolerate others, particularly if they have close association with centers of power?
Well, I can't think of a particular example really, but I know that obviously there should be some of those aspects happening, because of course other churches that are not fully connected with the government, I've got questions and I've got grievances, and you hear these things being talked about, but I can't give you a specific example. Well, I can't think of a specific example that I can give.
But I think the idea, David, with the question you're raising, the idea of Christian nation has been a highly contested idea from the very beginning when it was declared as a Christian nation in 1991. Partly, what has sustained that is ideological persecution of Muslims.
I see.
So the Pentecostal are highly unlikely to attack fellow Christians because they need them to sustain Zambia as a Christian nation. If they attack, they are likely to lose that. So they wouldn't go that route. They try to preserve. The enemy, who is an existential enemy, is a Muslim. So the Muslim has to be put at bay. So the Christian nation itself is a tool, it's a weapon that helps to ensure that the Muslims don't evangelize in Zambia. So the Muslims have to always be cautious to an extent that sometimes they have to accept it because they have no choice. If they have to be, all other religions, to be honest, all other religions in Zambia, to a large extent, whether you talk about African traditional religion, whether you talk about Muslims or Hindu or Muhammad religion, all of them are second class. Okay. Especially when it comes to politics. So once it's time to start politics, it's a highly Pentecostalized nation. So the politics, once they are coming, they are all kind of slogans that ensure if you are not a Christian, you will not become, you will not get anything. So there's this indirect persecution. The Muslims will start bringing suicide bombers. There is that language that always goes around into that.
Yeah, but
I think that's why it has been difficult. And most of these are the top ones will be going.
I think thank you for bringing that point, Shama, because actually this reminds me of when Zambia was declared a Christian nation, 2016, the new president, Edgar Lungu, went further with this and also had the National Day of Prayers, which is the 18th of October every year. There's National Day of Prayers. It's a holiday, people go into prayers. And also they instituted the national, what?
They've been building a cathedral.
Yes.
And Bishop Banda is a chairperson.
Cathedral prayers.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, so they also instituted a religious affairs ministry, national guidance and religious affairs ministry. And I remember there was a time, I think should be 2018 or 2019, that the minister of that department talked about, oh, we are going to ask all the Muslims what they are doing here, what it is they want and where they're coming from and all that. And I'm thinking, these are Zambians.
Yeah.
What are you, when you say where they're coming from, what does that mean?
So I don't want to monopolize the time, but just a supplementary point. How do Christians reconcile faith as polity with their idea of pacifism, service, meekness, which are the ideals of Christ they follow? I mean, it's faith as polity. It sits very well with Islamic ideology because that's who they are, and they don't claim to be serving humanity. They don't claim that they are here in this world to sacrifice themselves to serve everybody. But Christians do. Theologically, of all traditions of Christianity, how does Pentecostalism reconcile these opposites? This is a big question, but you can answer it later.
Wait, before you answer, we're going to soon run out of time. We have three more people, I think. We'll just collect the question and perhaps they are just comments, I don't know, and then we'll talk. Sarah, Guichun, and then was there someone here?
Actually, I was saying to move out of the politics to identity, because in early discussion you were talking about, and with Professor Esther also was talking about we never left, so what we are going to go back. But however, in my interviews with converts, for example, I remember one of the interviews with converts, the first things we did, when we converted to Christianity, we went and bought a set of sofa. And the first thing they change their lifestyle. And then with the lifestyle also you come to understand, bring the language issue. The language brings totally a set of different identity, mindset and thinking. And then yesterday we also talked about the self. And we discussed, we no longer have a really good definition of the self, what the self means in that regard. And especially if you are convert or you are coming to a new religion, and even which you may not inherit it, perhaps even if you inherit it, you might be a second generation to it or third generation. But still, the language you are, let's say, speaking in English, and even if you are fluent in English, and still there are some cultural background comes in within the language into your practice and push you away, more away from the roots you are. For example, I'm a convert, and but still, for me, I have two selves. One is Masum and another is Sarah, and still these two constantly negotiating with each other. And Sarah doesn't relate to English really well. She prefers still to think Farsi and all these things, but Sarah even dreams in English. So this is a constant negotiation in here. And then yet at the same time, yes, Sarah had to move to a new set of sofa, but though Maxim trying to reject that set of sofa, let's say the new sofa or whatever, but at the same time, both of them, they know there is no back. There is no returning back because there is nothing left in that. The only choice is to move forward. But what is the new forward moving? What does it look like in the sense of the let's say even second generation or third generation of Christians, or they're struggling with let's say African culture and the culture of Protestantism or Pentecostalism, which brings with it the capitalism. And at the heart of, for example, in my view, in Africa, at the heart of Africanness is not capitalism, but at the heart of Protestantism is capitalism. So when we are struggling with all these things, but yet at the same time saying we never left, might be a deception, sorry to say that, that's not the right word, approach to not allowing us to move forward, to a new forward things, rather than because, and there is the writer, I forgot his name, William something, and says we need to know where we come from and how we arrive where we are so we can determine where we are going next. So in that sense, we are not talking about going back, but we are thinking about going forward. How this forward looking would also, our past would come into the play. That is my struggle to understand. I don't know whether that's a comment or that's a question. I have no idea.
Okay, so I think we need to keep we need to keep it brief as we're running out of time. But I think that was a very interesting topic which we need to negotiate and continue to have a discussion on it. Who was it? Gwichen, and then Azel, and then I'm sorry, we cannot take any more question after that. Yeah, Gwichen.
Let me simplify my question. So, the current in Zambia is maybe different from the one that was introduced to them many years ago. So the classical Pentecostalism came into Zambia, and then since the inception of AOG in Zambia, I think they began to negotiate their theological forms, and they began to adapt local kind of practices from their culture and even adapt their worldview. And also shrine that was mentioned by Chama. So the Zambia has been evolved, constantly through negotiation and adapting local cultures and worldview, everything. Some people may see it as a kind of contextualization. Some people may see it as syncretism. So how can you draw the line between the two as a scholar in Pentecostalism in Zambia?
All your answer, Azel.
Yeah, mine also goes from what Dr. Sarah just said and Gretchen. I ask my question from a discipleship perspective. And then if I go straight, if Pentecostal churches are working in the framework of shrines, as Dr. Shama said, what kind of change in terms of individual as disciples of Christ, what do you see if they start a church somewhere in terms of individual behavior or fruit of the Spirit in brackets, or social change? Is there any change in the community that people can see, experience? And also at political level, because we have that in Burundi as well, but we permanently in conflicts. So I want just examples, because I think the question is related to what I just read. Thank you.
Yes, Mutale, and yes, respond straight to the point.
Well, thank you so much. But what I would say is that Pentecostal theology is a fluid theology, and they adapt in many ways to what current affairs are. And so between syncretism and contextualization, I still talk about the fluidity of Pentecostal theology. So obviously there should be some aspects that would be considered as syncretistic. But I would still talk about their fluidity, the theology of Pentecostalism being the fluid. That I think because of the fluid nature of Pentecostal theology, it has led to where Pentecostalism in Zambia is. And the fluidity is not just the Pentecostal Zambian fluidity. Generally, Pentecostal theology is fluid. And so adaptation to what is currently happening is easier for them. And also, even though sometimes they fight it, when they see the benefits that it will bring, there is always that possibility of we can do this and we can do this, and they'll find a way of theologizing and bringing scripture into that. And so yes, and then there is always the identity held in tension, Sarah. I think it's we cannot go back as Africans to wearing skins. We cannot do that. That is an aspect of our African culture that we can do. Well, sometimes like in the Zulu culture in South Africa, you see they wear for traditional things that are happening. On Heritage Day, on those days, they'll wear those traditional skins and all that. But we cannot do everyday life in wearing skins. Of course, we have to move on and live according to what is happening in current contemporary times. But still, even if I'll speak English and that changes my perspective on anything, like you, sometimes I actually also do dream in English. But when I'm deeply, deeply exhausted, I think in my mother tongue. And even to respond to your question, I have to take time to think, to construct that from my Bemba into English and be able to respond. That is the Bemba aspect of me that still lives with me. And so we still hold intentions. And I'll talk about this holding intention of identity and all that. During the COVID-19, Pentecostals before then would criticize herbs, the taking of herbs. We are coming from a culture where herbs are a natural remedy that we have for sickness and various ailments. But COVID-19 brought Pentecostals back to the herbs, and you will see TikTok videos of Pentecostals talking about use herbs, steam yourselves. So you take eucalyptus leaves, boil them, steam yourselves, and feel better. Put onions and this and that and that. And they'll tell you there's a lot of aspects. So we cannot really say we move or we reject who we are as Africans. We hold intention. That is what I will say.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Mutale. Sorry if there are others who wanted to ask questions, but we have genuinely run out of time, even taking into consideration the 4 minute, or the few minutes, what do they say, extra that we have, the Oxford time. Yeah. Thank you very much, and hope you'll come back next week. Next week, we have Steve Bevins, a Roman Catholic theologian who will be speaking to us. Thank you very much. Tom, good to see you.
Tom, it is amazing.
What a great lecture to attend. Thank you, Mutale. Wow.
Hi, Tom.
I'm so jealous that I'm sitting in this lonely room and